Hi there and welcome to another edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast, which is made by fans for fans and where the content is free. It's another bonus preview pod for you this week, guys. We're having a look at the Motherwell game this Sunday, and we'll also have a look at some of the stuff that's happened this week. It's been a bit of a comical week in many senses this week, so we'll have a wee look at that as well. As I say to you every week, guys, it's not just the podcast that we do here at Gersnet. We have the forums, there's match previews, match reviews, social media, there's a history archive on there. It's all independent and free content made by us for you. If you're new to the pod, we would ask you to subscribe. We've got over 4,000 subscribers now, so a big thanks to everyone who's subscribed so far. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. And put the word out there, let everyone know that we're here and what we're doing. The podcast is live tonight. It's a Friday night at 9 o'clock, but the show will be able to download or stream on a variety of platforms from tomorrow, including Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere else that you get your podcasts, guys. So time to bring in my guest. It's David Wren. He's sitting there. He had to move his clothes horse that was sitting in the background before we came on air. I won't tell you what was on it. It was a horrible pair of underwear, but we'll not talk about it. It's David Wren. How are you, David?
Good, thanks. So Neville and Carragher back together again tonight.
so it's Friday night. We always have a cheeky beer on a Friday. What you on?
Well, I've just finished my Blue Moon there that I was telling you about, the mango wheat version, and got a nice red, white and blue Sam Adams to mark the occasion.
Very good.
But no, I enjoy the Friday night ones a wee bit less. I think the Sunday's always business time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas Friday night's a bit more laid, but open collar shirts and all that, you know.
I'm not even wearing any trousers underneath this desk. You know what I mean? Sitting in the buff, nobody knows. I'm only kidding by that. I'm actually.
Terrible thought.
That is a bad thought for a Friday night. So how's your week been? You've been on holiday this week, whereas I was back this week after the Christmas break.
It's been good. I've not done a lot. I've just been reading, and I say reading. It takes me about 8 months to read a book, so I finished a book that I started reading about a fortnight ago, which is a new record for me. So, but it's been all right. I mean, as I was saying to you off air, I don't mind the old weeks off in lockdown, because I feel like you can get away with chilling out a bit more than you could, when everything's open and everything's going on. So yeah, it's been good, but again, not another exciting week in Scottish football.
Exciting. That's one way to describe it, David. Exciting and a bit farcical and comical in other senses. I think that's probably the best place to start, is what's happened this week. So, in the sort of chronological order, we had, Celtic and their Dubai trip when they came back. Now, they obviously had to change the fixture we had from the Saturday to the Monday anyway. Then Celtic announced that they've got a positive case with Julien. 13 players had to self-isolate, a couple of coaching staff as well. Then we had Lawwell's kind of pathetic apology, and then Celtic draw one each with Hibs, which puts us 21 points clear. So a kind of comical, farcical start to the week. There's other stuff that we'll come on to, but we'll focus on the sort of Celtic Dubai and then them drawn on Monday night at the moment. Just a farcical sort of situation.
I mean, we did the show on Sunday night, and it was actually ongoing as we were on air, and Frankie was sort of updating us in the background as to what was actually going on. So, I mean, and then you actually reminded me there that it developed further on Monday morning, but I mean, it was pretty. Farcical is probably the right word. I think I didn't expect 13 players, to be out for them going into a game against one of the better teams in the league. Obviously, the manager wouldn't have been there either. But I think it wasn't a good result for them again. But it was a strange one, because I think most Rangers fans on Monday morning would have thought, when they saw the figures of players that were out, that I think there was a lot of people probably lumping money on Hibs at that point to win the game. And then when the Celtic team came out, it wasn't quite as bad as we expected. So, but more drop points for them, works in our favour. But yeah, it's been I know we'll come on to a lot of the other stuff, but in terms of, the wider picture of Scottish football, it's been a pretty shameful week, actually. And it's made us look at, it's the first time in a wee while, I must admit that, well, I say a wee while, probably a couple of months, really.
First time since April.
Aye. But it's been pretty embarrassing, and it's worrying that the governing body have been, responsible for a lot of it, because that just doesn't paint a very good picture. And I think you touched on the law thing, and I mean, as always, we don't want to dwell too much on Celtic on this show, and I don't think, we often
we can spend a lot of time if we're laughing at them, though, David.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
But that Loyal interview was just
it's farcical.
Crazy. I mean, to be fair, I agree with a lot of what people are saying. He came out and apologised, and I think that was something nobody really expected the club to do, especially when you looked at correspondence that come out. So fair play for doing that. But as I saw, I mean, see, the thing is, with a lot of these things, I think Rangers fans as well, sometimes you go into a bit of denial about these things. And when we were at our worst with the statements and all that kind of stuff, you would often find yourself defending, not so much myself, but I know Rangers fans in general were defending some of the stuff that was coming out of the boardroom, which was farcical. Just before Gerrard came, really. But at the moment, you're not seeing a lot of that from a lot of their fans, and I think that tells its own story, because they can't even defend what the club are doing or saying. And I think the biggest slap in the face for everyone in Scottish football was when he said that they were more affected by the pandemic than any other club. I mean, I mentioned this on Sunday night, and their PR has been top notch for however many years, and for that to get through the door as the party line was incredible. And I think it was a massive slap in the face, not only to Celtic fans themselves and actually the wider Scottish football community, I suppose. Clubs like Falkirk, Partick Thistle, that have basically been shut down with, in the notice they got, if we're to believe what Stenhousemuir have said, which, after hearing this chairman on Sportsound tonight, I wouldn't, believe him to be making things up. If the clubs found out about that shutdown from a media release, then Jesus, that is horrendous. So yeah, for him to say that they're the most affected when they're they shouldn't have been, then I don't know if it was an attempt to control the narrative in some way or get the siege mentality, but I think it fell flat, and I think it fell flat with every fan of Scottish football.
I mean, I've got a view on this. Andy Walker was quite critical. Was it the game at the weekend? Or was it the game on Monday night? He came out and absolutely, went through Celtic, and Celtic then released a statement saying, well, we had permission to go and it was all good, and the COVID thing could have happened here anyway. So what's the problem? And then they've sort of came out and tried to, the reaction to that hasn't been great, especially from their own supporters and Andy Walker in the media and a couple other sort of Celtic-minded correspondents. And then they've come out in their sort of in-house channel with a pretty poor apology. As you say, Law's made that ridiculous comment about being, the worst affected club in the whole pandemic. I have my view on this is, see if Celtic weren't 21 points behind, there wouldn't be an issue here, because I don't think the Celtic support would be that bothered by what happened in Dubai. The main issue here is the fact that they're 21 points behind. That's the real issue. If this was last season and Celtic were 4 or 5 points in front, I don't think any of this happens. I think the media lap up his apology. I don't think Andy Walker goes through Celtic the way he did on Monday night. They can try and play it as, I think Andy Walker tried to give it the, when I played for Celtic, we weren't an arrogant club, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. That's fair enough. Different times when he played. But I don't think he would have been singing from that hymn sheet if Celtic were ahead in the league race right now. And that's what makes it a bit offensive to me, because they're making it out like it's a public health issue, but it's not. the real issue that every Celtic supporter and every sort of Celtic correspondent is annoyed at is the fact that they went on a jolly when they were 19 points behind at the time. That's what's pissed them off. And then the other stuff's just added to that. The stuff where, we're the most afflicted club with this, I think that's a huge insult when you consider what's happened to Hearts, what's happened to Falkirk. I mean, Falkirk released a statement through the week, which I thought made a really good point, that, because the money that's came in from the Scottish Government, the bailout cash, it's not means tested in terms of how it's handed out. It's handed out in terms of what division you're in. So part-time Alloa, who are in the Championship, got £500,000. Full-time Falkirk, who are in League One, get £150,000. And that just shows you that the whole thing is wrong. And the stuff that came out from the Stenhousemuir chairman today, or the chief executive, that he tried to raise his hand on a few occasions at that meeting on Wednesday, and all their mics were muted and they weren't allowed to make any comments at the meeting, is worrying stuff, I think. I mean, Rangers were mocked by a certain section in the media and by other clubs as well. I think Mr. Bowie at Kilmarnock being prominent among them, that Rangers never offered anything and there was no need for an independent review into how the SPFL was run, and that the governance in our game is fine. I think from April onwards, I think there's been ample evidence to suggest that things aren't great. I mean, when you consider the salary that Neil Doncaster's on, and we don't even have a sponsor of the league, and he keeps on saying, it's a members' organisation. It's like, well, what exactly is he giving us for his $400K a year?
I think the thing for me as well, when I worked in sport, which, was for 6 years there, the amount of stories that I did over that period of how, it was one of those ones you rolled it out quite a lot in international breaks and you didn't have a lot to fill the paper, but, it'd be things like, the booze ban in football, league reconstruction, all this stuff. What have we actually got over the past, 6 years in terms of any improvements to Scottish football? The playoffs, which I think are completely unfair, in the way that's the only, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the only change we've had to any of the league structure. Now, the league itself is boring, and I think every league in the country is boring. I think that's been the case for many, many years, way before I started watching football. Because you play the same teams constantly. So if you play, for instance, Rangers are guaranteed to play, obviously, Celtic 4 times a year, Aberdeen 4 times a year, Hibs 4 times a year, Hearts when they're up normally 4 times a year, and then Killie, another 4 times a year. And then you add in cup ties, which ultimately take that up. So the actual, the league itself is just unfit for purpose, and that's been the case for many, many years. Dundee, that farce in April with Dundee and the votes and all that stuff, their full thing was, right, well, we've voted this way, but our plan now is to get league reconstruction organised to make it easier for us to get promoted. So what came of that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the problem is, there's no, and as you say, no sponsor for the league. No avenues to go down to improve the game here. Sometimes you think, I'm a firm believer, and I very much prefer watching Scottish football to English football nowadays. But no wonder they laugh at us, call us a pub league. Because anyone, and I mean, I don't agree with that, but when you look at the way we're governed and the way our league system in football up here is carried out, it's embarrassing. And that stuff today about these clubs, Stenhousemuir, who I don't know a lot about Stenhousemuir, I must admit, but I would assume an honest club, make money through all the usual ways. You're a fan of Camelin, all that stuff, scratch cards and halftime draws, and just try to make ends meet. They've done nothing, no one in the world's done anything to deserve this pandemic. Clubs like that shouldn't be being ignored at meetings that directly affect them. I just can't get my head around it, and it's really, really disappointing to see smaller clubs being treated like that. And I just think, as you said, Neil Doncaster, and it's difficult to blame him individually, like blame him directly, because it's obviously a board there who control the entire thing. So he's part of, a board that makes decisions on behalf of Scottish football. But for too long now, these decisions have just been not in the interest of Scottish football. Poor decisions that are costing us and costing the reputation of the league. And this week has just been another example of that.
I think today as well. I think everybody knew what was coming with St Mirren and Kilmarnock on the COVID breaches after. They got hammered earlier on in the season, 3 points taken off them and handed to their opposition. And I think the initial fine for St Mirren was £40,000. Celtic breached the COVID regulations when they're on this jolly to Dubai. When they come back, there's, Ian Maxwell says there's no case to answer. So straight away, I think St Mirren and Kilmarnock must be thinking, well, how does that work? And then, surprise, surprise, today those decisions are overturned, and they're told that there's no case to answer, and the games are going to be rescheduled. When and where, who knows? Because we're already struggling. But I think that in itself shows the sort of the inconsistency and the almost amateur nature in which the game up here is governed. And recently we've had the old, the further Rangers go in front, the more a sort of clamour from certain sections for let's call the league now null and void. Let's deal with it all. Now, we had this conversation last year. Now, some on this podcast were for null and void, some were against it, some were happy just to wrap it up and hand out the prizes. I was one of the ones that called for null and void at the time, because I don't think you can declare a winner of a race if the race isn't complete. So I get the claims for that, but given that there was a precedent set last year, it seems slightly contradictory at sort of best, and mischief making it worse. That the same people that called for the league to be declared last year are now calling for null and void.
Yeah, I think I've sort of been keeping a close eye on that this week. And I'll go into sort of the wider picture of that. But last night on Sportsound, and when they were reading it, I was making dinner, and when they were reading out the headlines, it was former Celtic player and captain calls for a rethink as to whether the season should go on. And at that point, I was thinking, oh, Jesus, what have we got here? But it was actually Paul Lambert, who's obviously manager of, I think, Ipswich Town, who had COVID. And he was talking about, and absolutely, he was well within his rights, made a lot of good points. So it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be when they said former Celtic player and captain, because I thought it could be someone like Tom Boyd, who's obviously still got links to the club. I think he's an ambassador or something. But it wasn't. It was Lambert. He made a lot of good points, but the problem with this null and void chat is, I don't know, it feels like it's a difficult decision to make at the moment, because we're still, as I said this on the show on Sunday night, in terms of the testing and what we know about this virus, it's a lot further on than it was in March. So we know a lot more about, how it spreads. We've now got a vaccine. So in terms of suspending the season, I don't really see what that would, I don't see what the 3 week thing's gaining from the, I don't know if it's respite to work out what they're actually going to do with the lower leagues. But I think until Ian Maxwell said on Monday or Tuesday, there was no plans to look at the top flight or the championship. But there seems to be a narrative being built around that there will be, and I know there was articles in the papers this morning about Neil Doncaster not ruling it out, but really what he'd said was it'd be a bit of a disaster, but he couldn't rule anything out. And I get that point, because I don't think anyone can. Jason Leach was on I think BBC Scotland or something today, or Sky Sports I think it was, and he was speaking about how unpredictable the virus is. So you can't really say anything, which is true. That's been the case for the last 12 months. 10 months. So it's difficult, and it's the same sort of thing as we had in March. When you said yourself that you were behind the null and void calls, but it's going to be the same arguments. But I don't think there should be any, null and void chat in any sense, because I think that the league has to be finished. I think Gerrard was clever in what he said today. That he was backing the league being played to an end in April, and he's still doing that now. I think that's the case. I think even if they felt like they had to do a break in fixtures, you've got to bring it back, and we've got to finish the season. And by the way, this season ain't over. We haven't won this league. Let's not get carried away. Best case scenario for Celtic is we're 12 points in front, but 12 points is 4 wins or 4 defeats. That's the truth of the matter, and I think we've got to be aware of that. Just it's important that the league is finished. It's important that all of the leagues in Scotland are finished. And by the way, if it's null and void, it doesn't. That does nothing for anyone, because even if we resumed another season next season, that doesn't mean Celtic will win the 10, or that we'll win. It doesn't really affect anything because it doesn't affect in terms of anyone really benefiting from null and void, because I think that just means that the 2020-21 season just goes down as a lost season.
Yeah.
So I don't really see who would be benefiting from null and void. I think we need to look at the way the English Premier League did it down south, who played the season to an end and then made up the lost time the following season. I think the Euros are playing a part.
It's a bit more. So that's the point I was going to make. It's a bit difficult to find the extra room in the summer this year because of the Euros. We've not won it yet. I think you're right to say that. I think it's worth remembering that Celtic season unravelled quite quickly. Although they've not been at their best form for probably all of the season, the sort of disastrous form that's put them in this position has only been the last maybe 2 months. So that's all it would take from us. If Celtic had a bit of form and we lose a bit of form and go into a sort of similar period that Celtic went through earlier on in the season, then you're right. If they win their games in hand, it's back to 12 points. Probably 13 when you take the goal difference into consideration. But 13 points at this stage in the season is the league's not won by any stretch of the imagination. So we're in a strong position, and I think we should be very clear in that. That the players and the management and the coaching staff are doing fantastically well. But it's not over, and I would prefer it that Steven Gerrard, he seems to be adopting that attitude, and the players seem to be adopting that attitude, that it isn't over. But I just feel that some of the supporters are just getting a wee bit complacent. I've seen a lot of cheerio 10 in a row stuff this week, and I just think you're setting yourself up for a huge fall if you go down that road. So we're in a good position, but not over by any stretch. A wee bit of transfer speculation. I was a wee bit surprised at this, David. I think he was mentioned on Sunday night. I wasn't convinced we would go into the market in January, but there's a lot of chat around Scott Wright of Aberdeen. Gerrard commented on it today at his press conference, and it seems that rather than waiting, I think the initial plan was to get him to sign a pre-contract and get him over in the summer, but it seems that moves are being made at the moment. I think they're looking at either a player going in another direction or a slight tinkering in Ross McCrory's deal when he moves permanently in the summer. So it looks like he might be coming in January. I've got to admit, he's a player I don't know a huge amount about, but I think you're quite keen on him.
Yeah, I think he would fit in quite well to the way he plays. He's a skillful right-sided player, as far as I know. And if I've got that wrong, then I'm going to look really stupid. But I believe
that's... Friday night show, nobody cares.
I believe that's what he is. But yeah, I mean, I was fearful that right-hand side of that front three was going to turn into like Walter Smith's left midfield scenario as the years under Gerrard went on, in the sense that nobody ever actually fitted in there. So I think under Smith we played numerous people during that 3-in-a-row period. Lee McCulloch at left midfield and stuff like that. I was fearful that right-hand side of that front three was going to end up like that, because it's either Roof, who I'm not convinced by Roof in that position. I prefer him sort of. I don't know. It's quite difficult to put your finger on actually what him and Morella's, how they work up there when they play together. But I think we could do with someone a bit more like Kent, who can play in the right hand side of that front three. and I think he would fit the bill. I think he's a good, strong player in the top flight in Scotland, which to me is a market we should exploit because, Celtic do it well or have done it well in the past. You look at the boy Turnbull, who, is their best player at the moment by a mile. He came from Motherwell, and I think Alan Campbell's another one at Motherwell who's a good player that we should maybe be looking at. I think it's a market we've not exploited enough over the past few years, and I think the more players like, young, hungry players like Scott Wright we bring in, we'll build better for it. And the players that know the league, the players that can play against a Kilmarnock at Rugby Park and know exactly how to play against them. And I think the players we have brought in from the Premiership, you look at Jones, Greg Stewart, haven't quite worked out. But I think guys like Scott Wright and, dare I say, Lewis Ferguson, for example, I think would be better options for us in the transfer market, and we would get better value out of them and potentially be able to, sell them on for a profit in the future. So, yeah, I was quite pleased with that bit of business. I think, to be fair, our relations with clubs in Scotland seems to have improved. Obviously you've got McCrory going to Aberdeen, potentially Wright coming to us. You've got Jamie Murphy on loan at Hibs, Stephen Kelly on loan at Ross County. So we seem to be building up a bit of a relationship with some of the clubs in Scotland, which is probably a good thing because we've spoke probably on here a few times about the ability to go into the Scottish market because of the relationship historically we've had with clubs over the past 10 years. So I think the more we can talk to clubs about players that interest us, the better. And I think that boy would fit into our squad quite well.
I must admit, I think you've hit on a good point there with I think there's a bit of snobbery around, signing players from other Scottish clubs. Some of the sort of comments about Lewis Ferguson. Anytime I've seen him, I've yet to be sort of wowed. But some of our best signings have come from sort of provincial clubs. You think of Chris Boyd coming to Kilmarnock, Stephen A. Smith coming for Kilmarnock, Nacho Novo, Dundee. That used to be a sort of traditional route, and it seems to be one that supporters. It's one that's been lost, and I think because of that, supporters don't seem keen on doing it now. I think a lot of supporters look to further afield, foreign names and what have you. Whereas I think you're right, you can. I think Turnbull, as you pointed out, is going to be a great signing for Celtic. So, as a market that we could do better in, I think.
Obviously, I know that you thought you might burn when you said his name, but when you look at a UEFA Cup final team as well, Whittaker was from Hibs.
Yeah.
Kevin Thompson was from Hibs.
Yeah.
So we've done good business in the past, and I think Lewis Ferguson's one. I think he splits opinion. I don't know if it's that surname that
I think it is.
That bothers people, and obviously, I don't mean. I
certainly think it's a factor.
I don't mean that in the sense that people dislike him for the surname. I think if anything, that endears people to him. But then I think they watch him and think, oh, he's nothing like Barry or Derek. But that's just a stupid way of looking at it because I think he would come in and do a really good job for us because he knows the league. We need more players like that because the times when we drop points, not so much this season, but certainly in the first two seasons under Gerrard, were games we came off the back of European tie. We went to Fir Park or we went to Easter Road, and the players were sort of overwhelmed by the pressing and the way the physical nature of these games. But the guys that play in the Premiership, like Ferguson, like Alan Campbell, even Ryan Porteous, who's a player that I quite like, aspects of his game, I think he could be better. I think he could improve, but I think would potentially be a decent signing for us, would guide us through these games, and they would then become routine. But that's not really been an issue this season, so thankfully that's the case. But I think it's always good to have a nucleus of local Scottish players that know the league and can compete week to week, because you need a squad to win titles, and I think these boys would add a lot to it.
Right, before we go on and sort of cover Sunday's game, David, I need to mention the Rangers Picks game, which is, we've got a partnership with them here at Gersnet. So it's the Rangers Picks. It's a totally free pick'em game worth £1,000. it's powered by a company that's also involved in the stadium Wi-Fi and the new club app and what have you. The more fans that play, the more money the club receives. To play, all you need to do, if you go on to www.rangerspicks.com, there was 12 questions last week, but I do believe that's been increased. And it's about the game on Sunday. So it'll ask you certain questions like how many corners we're going to get, who do you think will score, all that kind of a thing. And it gives you a chance of winning £1,000. You must be over 18 to play. Terms and conditions apply. And as always, guys, please play responsibly. Now, I do believe David, our gaffer, Frankie, was a winner last week. I think he got second place. 20 quid or something he says he got back.
It's a lot for a man from Trinidad.
It does show you, though, that it's possible to win these things.
Yes. No, that's it. And I think as a man who won £35 on Monday night, having put Celtic 1, Hibernian 1 on as a scorecast, and it's always worth being in it, because you have to be in it to win it.
That's it.
And if anyone can actually decipher what the competition is from your fantastic advert there, then because you were all over the place. But no, if you go on Frankie's social media, you get all the actual details of it. But no, I mean, fantastic. Any opportunity to enter a competition like that, I think everyone should take it up.
I think the fact that the club gets the money as well, the more people that play, the more money the club receives, which is always good.
See, just on that, Colin.
Yeah.
There was a fantastic tweet this morning. I don't know if you saw it. And it was a guy, it was from 2013, and it was ideas to make the club money
Right.
at Rangers. And some of this stuff was fantastic. This was on, I think it was one of the forums, and one of the suggestions was brewing our own beer, which I thought wasn't bad, selling it on Rangers beer, selling blue cheese pizzas at halftime, and then doing a race at halftime, so punters, so fans could go on the Ibrox pitch in the race, and then folk could bet on who they thought was going to win. Oh, it was fantastic. It was great, and I can't remember. I've actually got my phone on me, but some of the stuff was fantastic.
That's proper banter here, that.
And the blue cheese pizzas and the beer, that I'd be up for that. I think we should actually get in touch with Rangers about that.
Well, back in the days when they first started the sort of catering stuff, you used to get your Gers Pecora and all that kind of thing, and Chris Wood's burgers and all that kind of stuff. It was all named around the club. Ready salted crisps, all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? I
still maintain that when you leave, see the burger vans outside Ibrox, I'd take those burgers over any burger in the world at times. I just think they're obviously not the best for you, but they're just brilliant. After a game, they're starving, especially a Champions League game or something.
Fresh out the tin, can't he whack it?
Oh, unbelievable.
Right, on to Sunday. Steven Gerrard at his press conference today, he gave a wee injury update. So Ryan Jack is back in full training. Eventually, it's taken longer than all of us sort of anticipated it would. Roof is expected to resume full training next week. Scott Arfield is still some bit away, but apparently he's stepped up his rehab. All positive stuff, but I think the Ryan Jack one's quite key, because I do feel sometimes, and especially in the sort of tighter games, I've always felt that Rangers have looked maybe a wee bit more vulnerable without him than they would with him there.
I like Ryan Jack. I think he's turned into a great signing for us, actually. And he came at a really wild time in our history over the past 5 years. But I think he's proved himself to be a top class operator, and I think he's Gerrard's boy. I think Gerrard loves him. So good to have him back. I think we've actually been a wee bit short in that area, and it's asking a lot of Kamara and Davis to operate in that engine room, and barely miss a game, because we saw what happened when they missed the game at St Mirren. So
yeah,
it'll be good to have him back. It'll be good to have him back in contention. I think he is one of our most important players. And yeah, it's good news, and hopefully Roof will be back soon as well. But I mean, I'm hoping for more goals for Morelos this weekend. I thought he was magnificent last weekend. He looked like he had a bit of a glint in his eye again. He looked like he had a sharpness. So I hope by all means Morelos scores another 2 or 3 goals this weekend and keeps Roof out of the team, because I think it's great to see him back. looking so fit and ready to go, especially at this time of the season. Because normally, last season, for instance, I think he stopped scoring after Christmas. So
yeah,
Roof, it'd be good to have him back in contention, but as long as Morelos keeps scoring, I think we'll be all right.
New manager, obviously, for Motherwell, Graham Alexander came in. They've got no wins. I was doing some stuff today. No wins in 11. Stephen Gerrard said today, he's expecting a different challenge than what he would get from a Stephen Robinson side. Given the sort of 5-0, the 5-5-0 sort of setup they put up at Ibrox and how robust they were, Motherwell, robust has been kind. Physical's probably a more accurate description. It will be interesting to see how different they're going to play and how they're going to set up for this game on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, Alexander's got a decent managerial record, actually. He, obviously gets sacked from Salford, but he had a 48% win record there. And at Scunthorpe, decent record as well. So he's not. I will admit, I've just pulled the stats up right in front of me.
I can see you pulling that up.
I don't have it on top of my head. But no, I'll just admit that then. But looking at his stats, I mean, Fleetwood had 39% win record, which isn't bad. More wins than losses. Scunthorpe, more wins than losses. 53 wins, 30 losses. And Salford, 54 wins, 31 losses. So I think he's better than I must admit, better than I assumed he was, because when Lee Clark got the Kelly job, he interviewed for it and didn't get it, obviously. But clearly, decent pedigree as a manager, and I think he likes to play. But yeah, it's quite difficult to know what we'll be in for on Sunday. But I'm quite confident in the way we're playing at the moment, and the way we've played this season, that I don't get too nervous about. Touch wood, I don't get too nervous about these games. I'm content that we've prepared and we'll know what we have to do. I think this is the first season under Gerrard I felt that, especially going into games like this.
I watched a wee bit of their game last week against St Mirren. That was Alexander's first game. They set up in a 4-3-3 with Hasty, Tony Watt, and Cole as the front three. Now, obviously, Hasty, I'm assuming, is ineligible because he'd be playing against his parent club. So part of me wonders if they might go 4-4-2, if they might try and do the same sort of job that Celtic done on us in the first half at Ibrox. Go with a top two, Cole and Watt, and go with four in the middle to try and stop, Tavernier and Barisic getting forward. But I mean, from a Rangers point of view, given the injuries and the sort of the squad that he's got to pick from, you would imagine that the team that Gerrard goes with on Sunday will probably be quite similar, if not identical, to the team he went with last week.
See how with Europe, when we'll play sides that are fit and good sides, I would say bring it on with that the way Celtic played against us that game at Ibrox, because it was clear to see that was really, really difficult to keep up, because pressing high up the pitch for any team is difficult, and pressing so high, Celtic are basically on us as soon as we get the ball out from the goalkeeper. So that you can't do it. You can't keep that up, and I would doubt highly that Motherwell can keep it up. So if they lined up in that way, I think you would just try to play through it the best you could in the first half. But second half, you're going to get chances because teams just can't keep that press up. But I don't know. I think they've got a good squad, and I think they've got a few bob as well. I think they spent a few quid on that squad. Obviously signed Stephen Wallace as well, who is a player that I really like. Obviously not one that would be a level of an Aberdeen or Rangers, Celtic or Hibs, but certainly a decent operator in the top flight. Scored a penalty against us. I believe he's a massive Rangers fan. I could be wrong, but I think him and his family are big Rangers men and women. So, but he's signed, so he's tricky. I think he'll play on Sunday. So I'm not sure they'll go for that same sort of diamond setup as Celtic, because I would see him playing. Perhaps he'll play in the right in place of Hasty. But yeah, I think it'll be a decent game. I think it'll be a difficult game, but we've already won there this season. Comfortably. What was the score? We beat them 5-1.
5-1. And their goal was an own goal from Edmondson. No, it was Edmondson.
Jesus, I didn't realise he played for us this season.
Yeah. And that was the day Jones scored as well. Jones got his goal that day.
What a day for the lads. The light for the lads.
What happened to they two? Where are they now? And obviously, the game at Ibrox was a bit different as well, because we conceded quite early on.
That was the most excited I'd been after the game. And I'll tell you,
I found that game hard going. I must admit.
But the reason for that was that, and I say excited, but like satisfied, because that was potentially season unraveling, that game.
Yeah.
And then we just got there, and I was delighted with that. So yeah, it's a big game. I think we'll win comfortably, but it's difficult to really predict because when they've got a new manager who is bringing in different ideas to the one that's left, which I would assume he is, in terms of style of play. Because I think, to be fair to Stephen Robinson, I think when he came to Ibrox, that was just like, let's just try and keep them out. Let's just try and not let them score. And I think he was struggling at that point. And well, it could have been a week or two after that he resigned. So
yeah,
I don't blame teams. And I said that when we were on the podcast that weekend. Can't blame teams for coming to Ibrox and sitting in, because why should they come and try and play like Hamilton did and get beat 8-0?
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. In their own patch, I don't know if they'll play the same way. But I think it'll be a decent game. But hopefully, my biggest hope going into the match is that Morelos gets another couple of goals.
Yeah, he looked good last week. Final sort of comment on the night. 300th appearance for Stephen Davis. I would imagine he would. I mean, given the injuries that we have in the middle of the park at the moment, you would imagine that he would get a starting place on Sunday. So 300 appearances for Stephen Davis. I mean, I can remember going back a while ago on the pod when we were linked to him, and my opinion was that if we signed Stephen Davis, we're instantly signing the best midfielder in the league and in the top flight in Scotland. It's hard to disagree with that. He's such a consistent performer. And I mean, I know there was the sort of middle bit in the way he left the club in 2012 that kind of upset a lot of supporters. I'll be honest, that doesn't bother me. I think he's been a tremendous servant to the club, and 300 appearances. I mean, we've obviously got Al McGregor in there now, who just got his 400th game. Guys like that. I mean, they come once every however many years. You know what I mean? It's great to have players like that at the club, and a great servant.
Yeah, he was part of like the first team that I saw consistently winning, which was the sort of 3 in a row. Obviously, I'd seen us win under McLeish. That was when I first started watching the club under Advocat and McLeish. But in my teen years, he was the one that was one of the top operators there. And it's good to see him, back, and he's running the show at Rangers and in the league, I think, which is good. There's a lot of talk about Tavernier being player of the season. But I think Davis will be close. If he keeps up this form till the end of the season, I think he's been magnificent. I thought against Celtic he was magnificent. I thought he was the best player in the park. That was maybe one of those where not everyone agreed with me, but I thought he was everywhere. 36 years old. He was fantastic. Is he 36? Have I got 36, that wrong? 36. He's been a magnificent servant to Rangers. And as you say, I don't actually think he was one of the ones that get a massive flack when he left. Nor was McGregor. So I think that's why when they came back, they were welcomed with open arms. What a career. I remember when he left Rangers that first season when he was at Southampton and they played Man City at the Etihad.
Yeah, I remember.
He was the best player in the park by a mile. But the thing, this will sound like I just want to make clear that I love Walter Smith. But remember, he still was playing the right hand side. That drove me insane because he was never a right midfielder. And I think every Rangers fan wanted to see him in the middle of the park. And then eventually, I think in the last couple of seasons he played there.
I think it was because Mendes was there at the time as well.
Mendes.
We were quite blessed with midfielders at the time, so I think that was part of it. Barry Ferguson and Mendes were there at the time.
Kevin Thompson as well. Yeah. But what a player! And it's good. It's good to see him get he'll get a lot of plaudits. I think this weekend he'll get a lot of tributes, and Gerrard's already done the gushing tribute in the papers today, so I would assume that's pretty a pretty good answer as to whether he'll start this weekend or not. But great serving. Him and McGregor have been fantastic, and hopefully they're the ones that are posing with the trophy at the end of the season if we keep this form up.
Quick question before we go, David. A wee trivia question for you. He's one cap away from equaling the record from a British home nations cap record. So 125 caps is a record. He's on 124. Who's got 125? Who's he going to equal?
Home nations. Can't be anyone.
Stop looking at Wikipedia.
I'm genuine. It can't be anyone Scottish.
He's English.
English. Oh, I got a few in my head. It's not Wayne Rooney, is it?
No.
Is it
a goalkeeper?
A goalkeeper? Peter Shilton?
Peter Shilton. He'll equal his record, and I'm assuming that he'll go on to surpass it, because
I hope he does.
He's going to retire anytime soon. So yeah, when he gets his next cap, that'll be another big moment in his career, and he deserves it. He is, as you say, Steven Gerrard's given him a lot of praise today, and I think he thoroughly deserves it. David, looking at the time, I think we've just about covered everything up, and I notice you've run out of your fancy beer there, so we'll call time there. So that's everything for tonight's show, guys. Thanks for joining us. A big thanks to David and his contributions there. Remember, we'll be here on Sunday night for the flagship show, looking at the game against Motherwell on Sunday. It's myself, I'm hosting, and Ross and David Fraser will be joining me. In the meantime, get yourself over to the Gersnet website and forums at www.gersnet.co.uk. And until Sunday night, guys, stay safe and bye for now.